It's hard to figure out the religious con because you'd like to think that people are smarter than this, but then again, people stole some money to Nigerian princes, so I guess that disproves that. How can anybody be this stupid? I don't know. Let's ask the religious. We're going to do a video today from Breaking the Habit. Casey Cole is a popular Catholic YouTuber, and I don't really understand why, because his message is really stop using your brain and just believe. I have no idea how that gains any traction these days, but he has a pretty good following, so I guess it does. Maybe that just proves how many really stupid people there are out there. Anyhow, Casey wants to explain why we should believe in God. Anybody think he's going to have any good reasons? Yeah, neither do I.
The idea of there being a powerful cosmic being responsible for creating and controlling the universe used to be commonplace.
So did believing in a flat earth. So did believing that disease came from demons or bad air. Anyone who argues, well, it used to be, is stupid. Now, we know that a lot of things that a lot of people used to believe are just wrong. I'm hoping that this video is going to get more intelligent from here, but I think we all know that's just not going to be the case. Used to be's aren't even an intelligent thing. I used to be a Christian. Then I got better. So what? Of course, we see this kind of thing a lot in religious videos, and I've pointed it out plenty of times before how much they rely on old dead theists for their ideas. It's pure appealing to authority, even though most modern authorities have come to the conclusion that the idiots of the past were simply wrong. Personally, I don't even care about any authorities. Just because some guy said a thing, that doesn't matter. It doesn't make that thing true. It doesn't do any more than my book says a thing. It's the actual data that matters, and these people, they don't have a thing, do they?
For the vast majority of human history, those who denied supernatural forces would have been in the extreme minority.
And probably dead, which likely explains why so many people at least pretended to believe in gods. It's why I think we need to look at what people do, not what people say. You know, like Matthew 7:16, you will know them by their fruits. So how many modern Christians, since those are the only ones that we can actually examine individually, actually behave as if they were Christian? And in my opinion, that's virtually none of them. How many go to church every week? A quarter of Americans say they do, but if you look at the actual numbers, it's less than 3%. That's about 8 million regular weekly churchgoers. How do we know that? Because Devin Pope at the University of Chicago has been tracking church attendance using cell phone GPS data to tell him where these people really are. So not only are people not actually going to church, but it tells us that Christians, by and large, they're just a bunch of liars. And that's not much of a surprise either, is it?
And so articulating why we believe in one was often unnecessary. That is not the case today. As atheism continues to grow, people of faith are all of a sudden having to defend their own existence.
Not existence, beliefs. And that should be true for everyone, on everything. Of course, the religious in this case, they don't want to do it, even though they should have been doing it all along. Maybe if they had failed 1,000 years ago as badly as they do today, history would have been a whole lot better, or at least a whole lot less bloody, without all the theists murdering anybody who disagreed with them. Yet, this all comes back to comfort, doesn't it? What he's really saying is, well, you shouldn't have to. But you should. I don't hold a single position, at least I don't think so, I haven't found one yet, that I cannot rationally defend. If I were to find one, I'd reject it until I could find a better reason to hold it. That's how rational people work. At least that's how they should work. And I figure it's pretty clear that Casey here, he is not rational. But I guess we'll find out for sure pretty soon.
Is this not just superstition? Has science not debunked the naivete of our ancient forefathers? Untrained in this sort of debate, some Christians attempt to frame their answer in the atheist language.
There is no atheist language. What he's really arguing against here is intellectualism and rationality. He's just saying, be dumb, because that's the only way he can hope to keep anyone in the pews. The Catholics have been hemorrhaging members for decades, and today, according to the Cooperative Election Study, it sits around 17% of Americans that profess Catholicism. Catholic mass attendance has fallen by more than half. These people are in serious trouble. So I get it when the Catholics desperately try to get anyone through the doors that they can. Maybe their priesthood is getting sex-starved with the lack of unsupervised children showing up. I have no idea, but these people are not doing well.
They try to prove mathematically, prove empirically, that there must be a God. Using logic, pointing to the unexplained, presenting what they believe to be forensic evidence of God's past deeds, they engage the question as if it were a question of science.
Because it is. Ultimately, it has to be. Science is the study of anything that is real. Anything that actually exists in or interacts with our reality, that should be discoverable by science. It's just that when these religious con men realized that science found nothing for their imaginary gods, they had to turn to something else to keep the rubes flooding in. And that's why they create this dichotomy between science and faith. One is defensible, the other is absolutely not, but they don't care about the truth, do they? They really just want to believe and have dumb people pay their bills so they don't have to go out and get real jobs where they have to compete and work hard. Who would ever want to do that, right? Certainly not the religious con men, because that's what this is really all about.
But this is simply not the case. Our belief in God is not a matter of fact, not a result of verifiable sense data. It's the result of faith.
Which is stupid. Yes, I know he's not making this video for us. None of them ever are. He's only talking to the gullible morons that he hopes will throw money in the collection plate on Sunday, because that's what he's really after. Or he's really doing it so the Pope gets richer and he can just lie to himself and say, "But my poverty makes the world a better place." No, you're just a sucker, just like all the rest. You've been taken for a ride by your church, and you're too dumb to figure it out on your own. This is why I really kind of pity these people, but in the end, they did it to themselves, and they need to be responsible for their own mistakes. Your faith is entirely empty. Casey, you are a moron.
To look for fingerprints or mathematical proofs is to look for God in the wrong places.
Instead of, say, your head, which is the only place that God probably resides. God is a concept, an imaginary friend intended to coddle the religiously deluded, people not bright enough to stand on their own 2 feet and deal with the real world as it actually is. That is not something that anybody ought to be proud of. Granted, dumb people tend to be dumb, which is why when you watch the overwhelming majority of religious content on YouTube, it becomes really obvious just how ignorant they all are. Religion, it's where IQs go to die. Sad, isn't it?
It's an attempt to replace faith with certainty. The only fact of the matter, what must guide our inquiry into this question, is that we don't know for certain that there's a God.
Tell that to most theists, who will tell you that they are. This is just the ignorant leading around the ignorant by the nose, and that's nothing to be proud of. Religion is just another word for delusion. None of you actually want the truth. the whole truth, the demonstrable truth. In fact, you are terrified of the truth. You are shivering in your echo chambers trying to avoid the truth because the truth isn't emotionally comforting. But you know what it still is? It's true. You can't avoid the truth no matter how much you try. You can just play make-believe, which is all these people are doing. This just makes these people look stupid. Mostly because they are. And that's not an insult. That's just an acknowledgement of reality. Like it or not, you have to deal with actual reality. And these are people who are just terrified of it.
We don't. At least not in the same way that we know that 2 plus 2 is 4, that gravity is a force that brings bodies of matter together. If God were an observable fact, then there would be no choice to believe, no room for free love, no faith.
And that's a good thing. All of the things that the religious cling to, they are not things that anyone with a brain ought to seek after. They are positively childish, and the religious are people who refuse to grow up and deal with the real world. They'd rather talk to themselves and believe things for which there is no objective evidence, just because it strokes their fragile egos, and that's just dumb. People who fall for this crap have problems. Mental, emotional, and maturity problems. They don't want to be actual intelligent adults. They are terrified of that. Instead, they cling to their imaginary security blankets and just huddle together, hiding from the real world because it's just too scary for them to bear. Who thinks that is a good idea? Who thinks these people are emotionally healthy? Let me know down in the comment section if you do, because I'm just curious.
God is not a fact.
Hey, you said it, not me. Now, I agree with you, God is not a demonstrable fact. God is an emotional security blanket in your head because you refuse to grow up. But by all means, continue to make a fool of yourself, Casey. It's kind of fun to watch.
But that doesn't mean that God can't be known to those who have been given the gift of faith. For those who believe, evidence abounds.
No, it does not. And this is why when we ask them for evidence, actual demonstrable evidence, they've got none to provide. They don't know the difference between evidence, which is demonstrable, and blind faith, which is not. And I just had a conversation with a theist who kept saying atheists wouldn't accept evidence for the immaterial. So I asked him, what would that evidence actually look like? How would he even provide it? Give us an example of actual evidence for the immaterial. And he couldn't do it. I kept asking him to explain what immaterial evidence would even look like, and he couldn't do it. He just kept changing the subject. These people know that they're full of it. They just can't bring themselves to admit it.
For one, we're privileged with innumerable accounts of those who have witnessed God with their own eyes.
Name one. Not what you believe is true, but what you can demonstrate is true. This is right back to faith and fifis. There isn't a single demonstrable eyewitness to anything. The Gospels were written anonymously, decades after the supposed facts, and Paul, even by his own admission, never saw anything. He had a drug trip on the road to Damascus. Wanting a thing to be true is not the same thing as demonstrating that it actually is true. Yet the religious, they can't admit that, can they? If he goes somewhere different with this, I'll hit him with it then. Because I don't watch these videos up front or anything, I don't know what he's actually going to say. So we're just discovering Casey's lunacy together for the first time.
Our scriptures testify that for more than a millennia, God spoke to his people through angels, powerful plagues, and direct commands.
My book says a thing. That's really all they have, isn't it? I just really want this to be true, and my book says a thing. Do you realize just how stupid that is? Any religion can say that, and in fact, just about all of them do. Do you now believe Hinduism because the Vedas say a thing? Or do you believe Islam because the Quran says a thing? How about, do you buy into Scientology? No? Then you're just being a hypocrite. But that's really all they've got, right? It's no wonder that they all look so dumb.
Witnesses saw the living and true God of Jesus Christ heal the sick and raise the dead.
Says who? I mean, honestly, aside from your say-so, why should I think that any of this is actually true? You've already said that you have no demonstrable evidence. In fact, you said that it's a bad thing to concern yourself with any verification at all. You just have to believe. Why? Explain that to someone outside of your faith who has no reason to take you or your silly book seriously. They can't. That's why they don't want to talk to us. That's why their churches are emptying out, because more and more people are just looking at their empty drivel and saying, that's really kind of dumb, and just going elsewhere. But he won't admit it, will he? He just wants his beliefs to be true, even though they're not.
A fraud does not have the immediate success that he had. A fake does not transform an entire region of the world overnight.
Neither of which demonstrably happened. Christianity was just another mystery religion until Constantine had a vision in 313 CE and then legalized Christianity. That's not overnight, that was hundreds of years later, and Christianity didn't become a big thing for longer than that. It wasn't until it was enforced by law, when people had no choice, when people could be arrested or killed for not professing belief, that Christianity became a success. Heck, Constantine himself didn't even get baptized until 337 CE, decades later, just before he died. None of that makes any of this true, and it sure didn't happen overnight. Scientology had more immediate success than Christianity did by a long shot. And we all know what a load of bullshit that is. This is not something to be impressed with. It's just not.
People saw with their eyes and professed with their lips a God who worked wonders, who spoke clearly, who heard their prayers and answered them.
That was the claim, yet we know, now that actual research has been done on the subject, that prayer works at a rate indistinguishable from random chance. Prayer isn't even a thing. Prayer is just talking to yourself and hoping that something happens. It doesn't matter what God you pray to, the odds are pretty much the same, and if the person that you're praying about knows that you're doing it, their chances of recovery actually go down. Performance anxiety is a bitch, isn't it? So pretty much everything that Casey has said so far has been demonstrably false. But he's not talking to us, is he? The people who have brains and actually check these claims out. He's talking to stupid people who take everything said on faith. They just want to believe it's true. It only takes an actual commitment to the real truth, the demonstrable truth, the facts that we can research on our own and find out what's actually going on, and attempt to go out and verify any of this information that will put them off the faith forever. Because it worked that way for me. It can work that way for you too. Care if it's true. Go find out. You'll find out how absolutely indefensible all of this really is.
For many, their testimony is enough to believe.
Then they're idiots. Because this is the thing, and you can verify this for yourself. Ask anyone who claims to have had an experience with God. Any God, it really doesn't matter. Ask them how they know it was God. They won't have a coherent answer. It's going to come down to faith, but faith doesn't make it true. And I have talked to thousands and thousands of theists over the years, and not one, none of them have ever had a compelling case for why their experience was actually with a real God. That's just what they believe, but belief does not equate to truth. These people are really dumb.
For the more philosophically minded, we find reason to believe because we cannot imagine an infinite regress of time and space.
First off, what you can imagine is entirely irrelevant. Even Einstein, back when he came up with the idea for black holes, because that's what the math said had to exist, he couldn't bring himself to believe it because the idea was so far beyond anything that he could imagine. They're still real, though. There's a supermassive black hole at the center of just about every galaxy that we've ever seen. There are billions and billions and billions of them. In fact, if there is a purpose to the universe, and I forget who said this exactly, it's not my words, it's somebody else's, but if there is a purpose to the universe, it's to make black holes, because they are one of the most common things out there. We have nothing at all to do with this. We are completely irrelevant. Now, once again, Casey's just appealing to fifis and faith, and that is just completely childish. Although that's not exactly a surprise, is it?
Where did it all come from? We can say that humans adapted from primitive monkeys that evolved from primitive mammals that go back to some primitive goo that ultimately go back to the Big Bang.
We don't know, and you don't just get to make something up because you're emotionally uncomfortable not knowing. That's not how this works. But this is how they work, isn't it? Well, I don't get it, therefore God. Sorry, but that's not rational. If you don't know, then you don't know. You don't just get to invent an explanation out of whole cloth because you really wish that you knew. Wishing doesn't mean you do. And that's what the religion is doing, beyond the con job scam that organized religion has been into since time immemorial. It's a support system for the clergy class, nothing more. Go out and beg for your supper and hope you can find people dumb enough to fall for it. Welcome to actual reality, Casey. Maybe stick around, you might learn something useful.
But what caused the Big Bang? Where did these atoms come from? Who created them? To go back and back and back to infinity just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't have to make sense to you. It just has to be true. Notice he asks, who created things? Not what, who. Not brought these things about, created. He's just assuming things that are not remotely in evidence just because he really wants it to be true. So what? What you want is irrelevant, but try convincing those who aren't bright enough to recognize the facts. They won't be able to understand. This is the problem with religion, one of many, many, many. It only caters to dumb people like Casey, people who are too afraid to just deal with the reality that they actually live in, because they don't want that. Reality is scary. They want some magical man in the sky to take care of them so they don't have to die and they don't have to be afraid. And, sorry, those things aren't real. Death happens regardless. You're just fooling yourself and wasting the only life that you actually have on your knees. Hopefully you're not a child on your knees in front of a priest because, you know, those things happen, but these aren't things that anybody ought to be proud of. If you don't care if the things in your head are true, then you are a moron. And we've had enough morons. Knock it off. So that's where we're going to end for the week because otherwise this is going to be very, very, very long. I hadn't planned on making this a two-parter until I got to this point and realized just how long it would be otherwise. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you just start writing and then go, ooh, holy shit, this is going to be a long one. And then you just cut it into multiple pieces, so whatever. Don't worry, the supercut will come out eventually, and people who want to can watch this in one glorious block of Casey debunking. Not that he really deserves that much attention. Casey Cole is just not worth it. So, what do you think so far? It seems to me that Casey's just shooting himself in the foot, at least for anyone with a working brain in their head. You don't go to rational people and then tell them not to be rational, which is pretty much why he's not talking to rational people in the first place, right? He just wants the terminally gullible and the absurdly dumb who are willing to come and sit in his pews and hand over their money for the lie because they just really want to believe. That's how all of these scams work though, right? I don't know about you, but I get these ridiculous come have dinner and listen to a presentation things all the time. They're just going to lie to you, and they're hoping that enough people shell out money to make the expenditures for dinner worthwhile. That's all religion is, after all. It's the lies without providing you a good dinner. Because they're looking for people dumb enough to show up at the table who aren't going to ask too many questions and aren't going to think about it too hard. Don't be those people. You're a whole lot smarter than that.